Guten Abend. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Martina, for inviting me. It's been a long journey. I will keep to the manuscript a bit and then we will move away from it. But if I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you, I have to look here. Well, my husband through 43 years, he died 14th of November in 2017 due to cancer in the pancreas. So it was in 2 months I had a husband and then he was dead. 1 week prior to his death sentence, I was working in my studio and all of a sudden it came to a halt. And I wondered, what happened? I couldn't work anymore. Sculpturally, I was simply blocked. So I put this away and thought, something is happening. And indeed it was. So the terminal period and subsequent death and the funeral was followed by an avalanche of practicalities. Thereafter, silence and emptiness settled in. My general feeling, I denoted a loneliness. It's not a word. It's a combination of being alone and the substantive loneliness. The world existed. I was alive. I had a family, but I felt lost. Artistically, I was stuck. So, Mourning Project is a series of artwork produced during the last 3 years. It consists of 3 main parts. This piece I call the Seraph. This is titled Sorrow Wall, and it comprises 2 sculpture objects in dialogue with the photos, the still photos and the video. The beginning of this was that I felt a need to clear the house after I had become alone. I gave away as much as possible, but remaining was the linen and a dozen of bleached T-shirts, used and worn and washed. I was unable to put this fabric in the waste bin. I simply couldn't do it. Nor did I wish to keep it in the cupboard. So the artist in me took action. I started with the shirts. I started to cut them into strips and just to bind it together, wildly, no plan, just do something. And this technique I denote wild knotting. It's not a technique, it's just wild knotting. But slowly I structured the work into a shape of a bowl. But without a strengthening skeleton, the pure textile form gravitates and loses precision. So in the end, I decided not to bring it because I keep it as a memory for myself. I even put it in the washing machine because it's T-shirts, but still, it's dropping. Now it comes to the Seraph, and now I need a little bit of help. So please take the blue structures away, and I will be in the red. After a while, I felt bodily a disorientation. The sensation was one of shrinking, and I needed some shelter. So gradually, I felt like I need a shield. I need something. I was thinking of like bishops' costumes. I was thinking of the king's guardians that have a small shelter house. And at the time, I got a huge roll of 3mm thick galvanized steel wire. If you have felt it, you can just try. It's hard. And I was asked, do you need this roll? And I said, yes, I put it there in the studio. And then I had come to the cupboards. all the material, the fabric for big duvets from the marriage. I didn't want to keep it. And the first one was the red one. So I thought, okay, I cut it. I see if I can make some shelter. So then I made, this is the first, and you see the difference in technique, I improve. It was so difficult to handle the material, but that difficulty matched my feeling of incompetence and helplessness. So it felt actually good not to achieve anything, or just to be, I was fighting with the material, not knowing where to go, will this become anything? But I thought, I stand in it, I see what comes out of it. And finally, I made the technique so that it would stand. But it's very unstable. But that is fine. I've done a lot of Tai Chi, and the Tao is thinking of moving. So that was perfect. So when I came here, I thought, okay, now I have some protection. Let's make the other one. So that was easier, hard, but easier. So then I'm protected. But being protected, I felt, okay, now I have a protection. This is quite a tiny room, small space. Let's walk out a bit. Peeping out. And then I come to Advent before Christmas, and I had some more linen and fabric left in blue and violet, and I thought that was appropriate for the season. So, okay, I started on a blue one. And I thought if I'd handle this red one, I'd make a blue one, which I did. So now we can put it back. And when that was finished, there should be an opening so that I can go out, because now I felt, okay, now I have moving space. Yeah. Now I have a space in which I can move. And then we were nearing Easter. And at the same time, this semester or this year, I was taking a course at University of Theology, Philosophy and Ethics, a course for teachers, for teaching. So now I'm actually a competent teacher of this subject in Norwegian school system from beginning to university. And that was very interesting for me. And we had a little tale from Jesaja, the prophet in the Old Testament. And this saying, this tale is 2,500 years old, extremely old text. And when Jesaja is made a prophet, he says, I can't speak, I can't say anything about this. And then the seraph comes, the head angel, so to speak, come and says, of course you can speak. You speak from God. You speak the truth. And sitting in my studio looking at this red structure and the blue structure, it occurred to me that in the old Christian iconography, the seraph is made in blue and blue, violet and red at a golden background. And the seraph is an angel with 3 wings. So I thought, I've made a seraph. These are my protecting wings. And here's the 3rd pair, my arms. And then as Easter came and I look into my cupboard, there was still fabric, now in white and light yellow. And I felt, oh, Easter, shouldn't there be some resurrection out of this hell? And it should, according to our tradition. So I set out and thought maybe I should make a 3rd pair. But that proved extremely difficult. It wouldn't come into form. It was impossible. It would stand for itself. And the strange thing was one evening at Easter, I was sitting in the dark because I started with painting and then we wanted the natural light. So, and suddenly, all of a sudden, I started to make it bigger. It grew. Because it was the same height as the others, my husband's height, to protect me. And it grew up like this, and I couldn't understand why. And a fortnight later, I was to call a man that was very dear to me, and my husband had actually said, well, if I die, you take care of Grete. And then I realized he died that night when I finished this. So that was a tough one. And before my husband died, he actually was very concerned because, and he said to the doctors and the nurses that you have to take care of my wife. Because he knew, as I learned in sort of groups that I went to, that when you have a loss, when you're grown up, and if you have had losses before, these losses will be activated. So one thing is that you lose your husband, which is natural. I mean, he was 70. But the other thing is that when you take away or you experience this new loss, the old losses, the old traumas, they are sort of exposed. And that, of course, happened. So also, when I started doing this here, it was a technique I actually had done 5 years previously. And that was because when I became a grandmother for her, I had the same age as my grand aunt, which I call Auntie Vivi. She was the sister of my fatherly grandmother, and she was working against the Nazis. So when they, the Germans came to Oslo in 1940, she immediately registered as an anti-Nazi worker. And after she hid Jews in her apartment in Oslo, and it's so moving because they have an interview with her in the Museum of the Resistance Fighters in Oslo. And the interviewer asks her, didn't you know it was dangerous? Didn't you know it was death penalty if you were, if anyone understood what you're doing? And she answered, nothing. She said nothing, and the interviewer asked again, didn't you know that it was a death penalty to do this thing? And she wouldn't answer. And then the interviewer says, you just think it was the right thing to do? And then she answers, she was 80 years old, yes. And she was my mental mother, because my mother was working and I had an Irish twin, so she was looking after me for my first 6 years. And I'm also named after a Holocaust victim. That's another story. So I hadn't a family name. I had a German name. Grete is not common, not in my family. It became fairly popular in Norway as well, but I knew there was something in my background. And after my husband died, I actually found, I found Grete, which was from Prague and was deceased in 1941. And she was a Nansen child in Bergen. And when she went back to her parents in Prague in 1941, because her parents thought it was too dangerous to be in Bergen at the time, it was better to be in Prague. My mother moved into her room because that room was in the house of a Jewish doctor that had sought refuge in Norway before the war. And he had taken this girl into his home to protect her. And when the bombing started in 1940, this family had been refugees at my mother's place outside Bergen. So she needed a room when she went to school, and then she got the place of Grete. And when I was born, we died, both of us, but then we were rescued. So we lived after all. But then my mother decided there are so many dead Greter, so this is a Grete. So I'm a surviving Grete, and I was raised by my aunt that survived 1.5 years in Ravensbrück. And in 2010, I think, I made her story into art. And this art piece is in Norway in a peace and conflict center in the middle of Norway, run by a German woman, Helga Arntzen, that is highly decorated actually by the king for her work. And she has started the white buses for school children, and now what is a peace and conflict group also, trying to pass on the history to school children. And I am in contact with her and send her greetings. She would have liked to be here. But anyway, I had the technique from the last piece in Tante Vivi. I wanted to show how one could sort of, how should I put it? The work started with, I tried to find a selection of clothes that she could have worn when she was taken prisoner. And I made a hanging of fabric with like 447 squares. That was the days she was in Ravensbrück. And when I had made that piece, it was so sorrowful, so awfully bad, that I thought I had to do something else. So I made a kind of resurrected piece, and then I did that in white linen. And it was like, you know, there can be warmth in the winter. It was so relieving with the white. And I never thought I ever should use that technique again. But now it came back to me, so I actually had done something, but that was more flat. So when I was doing that white piece, I was thinking of this resurrective piece of the Tante Vivi Memorial. So after that piece, I was wondering, what does a sorrow, which is an inner mental state, look like? Is it possible to show how it feels like to be mourning, to have a trauer, because you feel so stupid, because you are so vulnerable, and you can't, you haven't broken your leg, you have nothing to show. And I felt like I had to do something huge, something big. So I got the height here, and then I started like here with something, and it absolutely wouldn't stand. I mean, while working on it, I had to hang it and protect it, because otherwise it fell over. But that was the feeling, to make something that is overwhelming you, that you really do not control. And at the same time, I missed the practice. My husband and I, we used to go to a small brygge, a small place by the sea near our cabin. Every Sunday morning we used to do that before breakfast. And he used to stand on the pier and the brygge and do slight qigong exercises. And I used to stand another place on the beach, just nearby, and doing Tai Chi. And it was so difficult for me to go there, and I missed going there. So I think artists protect themselves with making art. So I started to take photos. And after a while, I thought, oh, what am I doing? Because when you lose something, at least I experience that time becomes quite different from what it normally is. It's both endless and very quick. So time had become very, very different for me from anything I'd experienced before. And then I gradually decided I will go there each Sunday morning and take a photo and see what happens. And as I did that, I kind of recaptured the pier. It wasn't dangerous or difficult anymore. And if you go into this, I made this like photo books using leftover from my husband's office. He was a researcher and he had a lot of stuff in the cupboard. So I used it and made it analogically, and also we put it up here in this way. And it's only done by my cell phone because I'm not a photographer and I have deeply respect for photographers as a profession, so I couldn't do that, but it's a diary. So it's made by my cell phone. It proved the best tool, so to speak, because it worked in all kind of weather. But this physical exercise, because this is a place you can't drive there, you have to go there, and it's like 5 kilometers from where you park, if you park. So you can bike, you can walk. The real hard struggle of getting there in rain and cold and snow, it was awful. And to be there at 9, some days I felt that, okay, this is fine because it matches my emotion, my feeling. And I took some photos and then I just stored them. And after a year, I started looking at them, and I've done very little with them. They are just what they are. And I've only put the date on, and you can, if you are interested, you can look there. And what I actually felt, especially when Martina invited me here, was that this is not about me. When you come, as a sculptor, when I've done something, I've given it to the world. It's like my children or grandchildren. They are themselves in the world. They're not mine anymore. I've given it away. And it's not about me, but it's a contribution as a method of how to deal with mourning. This is my way, making my shelter, registering my Sunday atmosphere, my milieu. It could be done by anyone, anywhere. And in the beginning, we wanted to do something interactive. Now it's been hopeless. But invite, for instance, families. How do you deal with your sorrow? What do you do? And what I have experienced is really that it helps. It helps a lot because I've moved from my and empowered myself, making a room in which I could live, making a protection so that I could go into the world. And I even made this big wall, and you see, when you circle around it, it goes down to the earth. And that took 3 years, like Isabel Allende, the author, says. A deep sorrow takes 3 years. And my daughter also comforted me and said, Mom, don't despair, it takes 3 years. And 3 years seems endless, totally endless. And now it will be 4 years at Christmas. But here, when I made the sorrow wall, I think I've stopped counting, but it is about 3 years of squares. So if you want, you can count them. It's 3 years, 1 day for each. And then the dot with the rest of the red sheets came. And this is not hollow. This is I would say, a fairly good sculpture. It's made from the real thing from within. It's filled, and you can touch it, you can hold it, and it's heavy, and it's all knitted. And I made this even fabric on the upper side, and then strengthened it just to get the form right. There's nothing, I haven't used anything to structure it. It's just, I would say, a clear tone. Yeah, so touch it. And somebody standing in the portal, because now I thought, now I'm finished. Now this project is finished. Where am I going now? And then I felt like, oh, now I need something over my head. I need a portal. I need something to go through. So I started with making a kind of heaven, and I hung it up in the studio. And when it came down, I realized it can't stand by itself. Of course it can't stand by itself. And I had to strengthen it with my hammock. I always do things that's impossible. Always do things I don't know if I can do it. That's the fun of it, or the despairing part of it. So I found, I demantled the roof of a hammock. So I strengthened it here. And of course, I know I could have bought an iron metal piece that would make it totally stiff. I mean, you have it everywhere. That's not what I was after. I was after this kind of feeling, fluid entity that matched my feelings and emotions. So now it's fairly stabilized, but it's moving. It's so this is the way out, and we are going to open the door so you can pass it, because here I go from the sorrow and into the world. And some of my friends, they tried it, and you should try it and see what happens. And it started off white because I had more of this material. But as summer came, it felt like no need to be so white. Why not take up the flowering? Why not take in all the colors? So then all the colors returned. And my son helped me putting all the small video clips, 1 minute each Sunday together. And we have the date in the beginning of each so that you can follow what happens. Since we are not professional filmmakers, the sound is not absolutely perfect, but it's okay. So, and if you see this piece, you hear also the sounds, and you see the shift in the water, and I think the shift, the way the beach natural milieu is so comforting, because it shows that some days it's calm, some days the waves are quite heavy. One thing that wasn't part of it actually is that it shows climate change. That wasn't actually intended, but it's not that much winter that you might expect. I've not cheated. It is the complete year and the dates are correct. So that's another interpretation of the work. But so now we come to the laughing part, the joking part, because now we are through the mourning. And I can give this away to you and say that, yes, trauer, sorrow, mourning, this place with so much suffering. We are alive, and our obligation is to be happy as long as we are here, because otherwise, what should we say to all the heftlings, all those imprisoned? If we are not happy, yes, this is a saying of the doctor of Dalai Lama. He was asked in a Norwegian radio program, What about all the suffering in the world? Isn't it terrible? And he told the interviewer that your only obligation in the way you are and how you live is to be happy. Because if you are not happy, how should those who are unhappy have something to look forward to if that's unhappiness? So our obligation is to be grateful and to try to live our lives as best as we can, as long as we live. Thank you.